being short with my kids or sometimes with Lisa. So my wife really suggested, based on the story she did, you need to go do this.
I just want to take a quick pause to talk about the guests that they selected. They seem to all be absolute millionaires. That's just something that's hitting me right off the bat. Most of the people using psychedelics do not have this level of privilege. Hey all, what's good? It's 𝙬𝙜𝙤𝙘𝙈𝙪𝙨𝙝. Thanks so much for joining me today, and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, welcome. We're a realm dedicated to psychedelics and sacred plant medicine, all about demystifying and destigmatizing the trip. Today, we're going to do our first Psychonaut REACTS video, and it just so happens to be a 2-minute episode of Red Table Talk. If you get a kick out of this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. Every sub helps. One of the reasons I wanted to react to this video today was because, one, we don't typically see this conversation of psychedelics and plant medicine had within public figures in the Black community outside of the Black mushroom community, right? So these are 3 folks known for entertainment, which is huge. What a win for mushrooms. But also, this is a family having this conversation, right? And for me, I know talking with my family about magic mushrooms has been quite the trip. And so I believe it is Jaden Smith bringing magic mushrooms to the red table. I'm very excited to listen to this conversation. All right, let's hop in.
This is going to be interesting to say the very, very least.
Interesting, yes.
We have a special RTT guest host. The sunshine of my heart is here. Jaden Smith. Jaden. We're excited to have you.
This is gonna be amazing. I'm just glad to be here.
Aw, Jaden. When we said we wanted to bring him to the table, I was like, well, what do you want to talk about? He said, mushrooms.
Yeah. Yeah.
The magic kind, of course.
Yeah.
I love this. First off, same Jaden, same. What do we want to talk about? What do we want to talk about right off the bat? And I also love that for my generation, this is something that is at the forefront of our minds, right? So Jaden could talk about anything, but he chose to talk about magic mushrooms. That's what's up. Spread the good word, Jaden.
Right now, it's such an interesting time because these studies just about mushrooms in general are coming out. That's what really sparked my interest.
I wasn't aware of all the studies until you put me on game with that. And this is big news. Top doctors say magic mushroom therapy is the most significant advance in mental health treatment since Prozac. And that's huge. The prestigious Johns Hopkins University found mushroom therapy is 4 times more effective than traditional antidepressants. And I can vouch for that one. Yeah.
So this is really dope, right? Already within the first minute of their show, they're putting their audience on to the studies and the science and the hard facts about magic mushrooms. So I love it. I love that this is, at the front of the conversation, and that, they're presenting their viewers with a hard look at some of the hard research.
Newsweek even put it on the cover.
Yeah.
I was introduced to plant medicine 10 years ago to deal with my depression, and it knocked it out. I'm really interested in hearing about that aspect of it. Yeah, what it does, unlike just going to therapy and putting people on Prozac, right? Which I did that too. Which that is not successful for so many people. And that's
for
the
so
thing.
many people.
So for me, I had struggled with depression for so long. Crippling depression. So the thing about the plant medicine is that not only does it help you feel better, but it helps you solve the problems of how you got there in the first place.
And I think that is a really important point that Jada brings up. Plant medicine challenges you in a different way than, say, Prozac might. Plant medicine challenges you to look deep within yourself. And in these studies, they are pairing plant medicine with therapy. It's not something that's just a Band-Aid to your depression. It's something that goes deeper.
So, Jaden, what led you to psychedelics?
It started as pure curiosity.
Yeah.
Not believing that mushrooms could actually, like, make you feel any type of way.
Because we have them for dinner.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And I had an experience.
They're so
and during
funny.
that experience, I understood what ego was for the first time. It was always in my head talking, telling me what I was and what I wasn't. And for the first time, I had like a ego dissolution where I was like, that was the moment that really changed me. You get to a place in your life where you're blocked by something, whether it's a trauma, whether it's your emotions, your ego, not being able to express yourself. And then I feel like psychedelics are a way to tear down that wall and see what's beyond it. Doing it guided with people that are professionals, I feel like really increases the chances of having that mystical experience and get like, yo, I'm trying to figure this thing out in my life, and that's why I'm doing it, opposed to, oh, you know, I just want to
trip.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Hell yeah, Jaden. I want to take a quick pause for a hell yeah right there. Doing psychedelics with professionals and people who professionally serve the medicine, have been trained in the medicine, is a very important experience and will help you get much more out of the experience than just trying to do it for fun recreationally. As I say on this channel a lot, I don't think you can do psychedelics recreationally. You know, you're always going to get some kind of benefit out of it. But yes, doing it with a solid set and setting, and even with professionals or a trained trip sitter if you're able to, that's, Jaden's right on the mushrooms there.
I just want to get high.
And I feel like
good.
that can be dangerous.
Yeah.
It should only ever be used to like really bring about profound change in someone's life. And it has to be specifically directed. I'm doing this because.
Yeah, that's important.
What do you think, Gan? Would you ever try mushroom?
Have I ever, or would I now?
Oh, wow.
Well, I mean, have you ever? Well, I've done psychedelic drugs before.
Right.
You know, because I came from the woo-woo era.
Yeah, from the woo-woo era.
Back then, it was strictly to alter my state of mind.
Gammy knows what's up. I just want to say Gammy knows what's up. And also the fact that they're having such a lighthearted conversation about this, that they're laughing, that they're like poking fun at each other. I think this is like such a great example of how these conversations don't have to be like serious and scary. And like, we can talk to our families about this. A lot of folks, even folks who think they might not be able to, that was me. I didn't think I'd be able to talk to my family about this. But fortunately, I'm privileged enough that I have been able to. And yeah, the conversations are fun. And I just love that it's being presented in a fun and lighthearted way.
Right, you know, so it was strictly about getting high.
Right.
That is my major concern with this revolutionary treatment.
Right.
I'm all for it, I guess. I'm just really, really concerned about the potential for it to lead to addiction, because particularly I know that you both have tried this. In our family, we have such a strong history of addiction.
Well, you know, there's no physical addiction that you can have.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
But when I think about Jaden, you know, and how his mind works, he reminds me so much of your dad. I just know that he did a lot of experimentation with psychedelics, and it led him to the path of other drugs that led to his addiction. So that's always, at the end of the day, that's always in my mind.
Well,
It's
here's what I want to say about that. Like with anything, it's all about where you're sitting.
yeah. Why you're doing it.
And why you're doing it. So
I want to just take a moment here to say, psychedelics as gateway drugs, I don't know. I think this is a generational difference, but I don't buy it. I don't believe in drugs as gateways to other drugs. I believe that the true gateway drug is trauma for the most part, especially trauma that we try to push away, trauma that we try to escape in other ways. I think that is the real gateway drug. I don't think that psilocybin, cannabis, LSD, etc. I don't buy those as gateway drugs. But especially in my experience, folks seem to be pretty happy with those. I don't have a lot of friends who seek out other more addictive drugs after developing relationships with these anti-addictive drugs. So that's just my 2 cents.
Why you're doing it.
every drug that's on the market right now can be abused. So you can use it for good, or you can use it recklessly, right?
Okay, with all that being said, I'm open. Okay, I'm trying to come to the table open-minded because I really am curious about it.
Well, joining the table today is one of my dopest friends who says the power of psychedelics saved him. His name is Bob Parsons. He is the founder of GoDaddy as well as PXG Golf. And one of our RTT favorites, investigative journalist Lisa Ling, who just suggested her husband, Dr. Paul Sung, explore ayahuasca.
And there's
Love it. Love it.
Hi.
How you guys doing?
Good to see you. And to guide us through the facts, we got rock star researcher on all things psychedelics,
Michael Pollan.
is
Hey.
here, joining us from Harvard.
I didn't know Michael Pollan was going to be a part of this episode, but that's what's up.
His best-selling book, How to Change Your Mind, is being called the Bible of Psychedelics. Let's start with...
Great book. Especially for anyone who reads audiobooks. That's how I read How to Change Your Mind. Highly recommend that read.
the basics. What are psychedelics?
Psychedelics are a class of compounds, many of which are produced by plants or fungi. Psilocybin, LSD, DMT, ayahuasca, and mescaline. These are the classic psychedelics. The word psychedelic merely means mind manifesting. These are drugs that bring all sorts of subconscious material into your space of awareness. They work by hitting the serotonin receptor in the brain, but we don't really understand completely why they work. But they have a profound effect on perception. They dredge up all sorts of interesting memories. They distort perception in interesting ways. And they have the potential to change consciousness in a short-term and a long-term way.
When people try to put mushrooms or ayahuasca in a category of drugs, can you really call these plants drugs?
Well, drugs are medicines. I prefer the term medicine. I think drugs has a lot of negative associations.
Yeah.
When we think of drugs, we think of abuse, we think of addiction.
Yes.
And in fact, these compounds are not addictive in the normal sense. They're not habit forming. In fact, after a big psychedelic experience, you're like, I hope I never have to do that again.
Totally.
I don't remember having any pleasant experience with psychedelics.
It's hard work. I
Yes.
think a guided psychedelic trip is really hard work. You are dredging through the and, getting in touch sometimes with trauma. It's an encounter with yourself, and that's a scary place to go.
Yeah, it's super scary. But I have to say, it's been super healing for my life. I know that as a fact. Dr. Paul, what led you to psychedelics?
I was at a point in my life just realizing that perhaps there was more to my life and myself, and I felt I was going through motions, just emotionally blunted, and also just wanting to sort of change the cycle of what was passed on generationally to me, and then to make sure I didn't do that to my own kids.
Yeah.
There's certain times where I find myself being short with my kids, or sometimes with Lisa. So my wife really suggested, based on a story she did, you need to go do this.
I just want to take a quick pause to talk about these guests that they selected. They seem to all be absolute millionaires. That's just something that's hitting me right off the bat, right? They are all they seem to be extremely privileged people, if not highly successful journalists or doctors. A CEO, or Michael Pollan, another very successful person. I would have liked to see something from an everyday journeyer, or some kind of representation of where this medicine comes from within the first, 10 minutes, either from Indigenous people themselves or from people who know the lineage with magic mushrooms, Maria Sabina, how they came from Mexico, the consequences she had to face for all of that. I think that's a very important part of the story that's missing here. And I also think most of the people using psychedelics do not have this level of privilege in terms of being multimillionaires. So that is just like one thing on the guests.
Which one did you use?
I did ayahuasca. It was everything and more. I had tried to do some therapy many years ago, but unlike therapy where it takes a long time to develop that comfort level with your therapist, and then they unearth some things, but you never go deep enough, there's sort of that emotional aspect of resenting what you've uncovered. I found ayahuasca is much more comprehensive. Not only does it help to take you to where those areas are immediately, but it's not designed to then stir up resentment.
So he's talking about he took ayahuasca first. The active ingredient of ayahuasca, of course, being DMT. So we're having a conversation about DMT here. So many average Joe folks take ayahuasca first, which I absolutely cannot and do not understand. It is literally going from 0 to 100 in terms of psychedelics. Ayahuasca and DMT being some of the most potent psychedelics you could ever experience. So this is really like riding a horse for the first time and the horse just booking it, like going full speed, full horsepower, and trying to hang on to that horse for dear life. I always suggest to people that they take lower doses first of substances like psilocybin and work their way up to an ayahuasca experience.
Ayahuasca took me one step further and was able to show me their trauma that they endured and made it much more of a full healing for everyone rather than just me understanding why I was angry at my parents.
All right, so I mean, this brings up a good point in that plant medicines can be extremely healing for family dynamics, interpersonal dynamics, understanding things outside of your own ego, and for me, it's understanding things outside of my tunnel vision. So I think they're bringing up a really great point here.
For me, is that let me know how I can feel.
Yeah.
And then as you find yourself going the other way, you can almost put yourself back somewhat.
That's something I've heard from a lot of
people.
people. I remember talking to a woman who had been depressed since 1992.
Wow.
After a psilocybin experience in a university drug trial, had 1 month of not being depressed. Her depression gradually came back over the course of a year. But having had that experience of what it could be like gave her hope.
Yeah.
Your brain will go back to that experience, and so you can refresh it even without another psychedelic.
Right.
In the same way that a single trauma can change your brain forever, as happened to you, Bob, a positive experience, a radically positive experience, like a mystical experience, can change your brain forever too.
I love this idea as a psychedelic as kind of like the anti-trauma, because it does warp you and shift your perspective, and your understanding of the world does hit you in a similar place that a trauma does. I think these are some really great points that they're making. And I love that they're talking from their personal experiences because, that's all we can do.
New connections have been forming in your brain, and that's what allows you to break out of those destructive habits of thought that so many of us have and contribute to addiction as well as depression and anxiety. They all may be the same kind of disorder, which is a brain that's stuck in rumination. And that's why I think psychedelics work for so many different forms of mental illness and distress.
Yeah.
Me too.
Gam, I will just also point out, Paul said that the 2 times that he journeyed, people brought their moms along with them. Wow. And this blockage that you have felt throughout your life, that may have transcended the generations, right? That Jada may have been impacted by that blockage because you've continued to, not be able to identify it or understand the roots of it.
Yeah. Wow. We've been really talking about these in-depth, very intense experiences, but can we talk a little bit about microdosing, the dangers of microdosing, the benefits of microdosing?
Okay, I need to roll back the tape. What is microdosing?
Okay, Michael, can you explain to us what microdosing actually is?
Microdosing is the use of small amounts of psychedelics on a daily or almost daily basis, 1/10 of a typical dose. Ideally, you don't feel it. Many people believe that this has a positive effect on mood, on productivity, on creativity. There's not a lot of science behind it yet. We need to study it. We don't really know what's going on, except that many people seem to be helped by it.
Yeah, so I made a microdosing video on my channel about, is microdosing science? Is it placebo? Because a recent study came out with the conclusion that microdosing was placebo, which hurt a lot of our feelings. But I microdose weekly and am working on future videos about what it's been like microdosing for a month, for example. But yeah, microdosing. I don't know. The jury is still out, but for me, I feel like I have my answer on microdosing. And if you're dipping your feet into psychedelics and you just have a curiosity of if it does anything, microdosing can be a great way to see effects of psychedelics in a way that you don't have to have a huge moderate dose trip, a large trip, anything like that. You can just experience it on a daily basis.
Journeys typically last 4 to 6 hours. During the session, the environment matters enormously.
Yep.
You'll wear eye shades to eliminate distractions and listen to a special playlist to enhance the experience. Your guide will stay with you at all times. Then afterwards is this critical process of what's called integration. And that's when you tell the story of what you experienced, and with the guide's help, you make sense of it. You figure out what can we extract from this experience and take forward into our lives.
So this is a really great kind of detour, right? They're talking about integration. I see it in a lot of places, even on my channel, that this is something that we under-discuss, integration. So I know I need to be doing a bit of a better job on that. But everyone in community, I think we could be all talking more about integration, talking about your trip. Yeah.
How can we apply it? How can we sustain it? And I think the risk, and there is a psychological risk to taking psychedelics. I don't think we should underestimate that.
Yeah.
The risk is that you have a destabilizing, confusing experience and you're a mess. But with the help of a good guide, you can sort through that. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to not do this on your own. Do it with someone who can talk to you for a long time afterwards, because you'll be chewing on what happens, not just for days, not just for weeks, but for years.
Years. Yeah, that's a good point, Michael. I know of people who have had spouses take part in a journey with a shaman or a guide that may not have had as much experience. And it was so destabilizing that they experienced something in their journey that propelled them to leave their family, abandon their kids, abandon all of their responsibilities. And if you don't have the right person guiding you through that and figuring out how to get reacclimated, it can actually have some negative consequences.
I think an interesting part about that, it's tough. It's tough if that's something that this person actually wants to be doing and something that they know in their heart that that's what they want. Of course, you need a solid guide to be able to talk somebody down from that. But once somebody has had the realization that they don't want to be a family man anymore, let's say, oof, that's a really tough one. That's a really tough one because they're going to have that information about themselves, and then being able to see that clearly and going back to that life, that's a toughie. That's a real toughie. Because psychedelics will show you the truth about yourself. Not to say that anybody deserves family abandonment because one of their spouses has gone off and journeyed somewhere that was administered in a not so great way. But even let's say you have that realization and you don't leave your family, that's still going to seriously affect your life, affect how you operate, etc., etc. I mean, there are a bunch of people out here who, let's say, regret having children or had children not for themselves, but to please or appease somebody else. Yeah, that stuff is definitely going to come up for you when you journey. If not, it's going to be at the front of your journey.
There are also forms of mental illness that are not appropriate for psychedelics.
Yep.
If you suffer from schizophrenia,
Yep.
personality disorders, some people think mania, you should not take it. And that's one of the reasons to get some medical advice first.
Yeah.
There are certain kinds of risks. And there are people who have had their first psychotic break on a psychedelic.
Yep.
Yeah.
Michael, I would love to know about what's going on in Johns Hopkins and if you think that there's any more studies like that that might be taking place in other facilities around the world.
Yes, there are, Jaden. Oh my gosh, yeah, there's so many. I'm gonna skip that.
My pleasure.
Michael, I wonder what measures are being taken to include the African American community in these studies.
Great question, Gammy. Absolutely great question. And can I just say that the playlist music that they do choose for a lot of the studies, at least the Johns Hopkins one I know, at least 70% of that music is classical music. That, if you have an ancestral history of having to deal with colonizers in the way that you weren't the colonizer, you don't necessarily want to tune in to Colonize FM. You can find the Johns Hopkins playlist on Spotify. It is on Spotify. But when Black people are included in the study, this is just what I mean to say, when Black people are included in the study, it is not necessarily catered to non-white people, especially in terms of the musical choices. I don't want to listen to classical music for 6 straight hours not tripping, okay? I could listen to it up to an hour tripping, but not tripping, damn.
Such a great question. Look, the psychedelic world in the United States has been very white.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes.
And indeed, in some of the studies, there have not been enough Black subjects to draw conclusions. And we have to fix that. I've been often asked, why do African Americans, are they less likely to use psychedelics? And
No.
one of the answers that I've come up with, and you can tell me if this sounds right, is that to use a psychedelic is to put down your defenses, and you need to feel very safe in your body. There are a lot of African Americans who live in dangerous places,
Right,
who can't let down their guard to have a day spent with a psychedelic. So you have to create an environment where people feel safe.
Right, and that's intentional, that, like, as Black people, we're not put in places where we feel safe in our body. And also it's equally intentional that we are kept out of the psychedelic space. Because to put us into the psychedelic space would end cycles and cycles perpetuated throughout generation of Black trauma. And our system is obviously built on that trauma. So I think both things are very intentional.
I'm encouraged to see there's a lot of outreach now, because there's racial trauma in this country, as we well know, and there's enormous potential here to treat it. We need also guides with Black faces. We need people in the community administering it. MAPS is one of the really important groups developing psychedelic therapy, and they're making a concerted effort to train Black guides and reach out to the African American community.
Also, Black people should have access to medicine, and medicine can be expensive. I know just for one trip on the East Coast here, it could cost $40 to $50 for what I would call a moderate dose of psilocybin mushrooms. That's not mad accessible. Obviously growing is not legal, but Black people also, we need access to the medicine in an affordable way. So many people in my comment sections are desperate for finding out where they can source, and so many of them are Black folk, and it always breaks my heart to be like, I can't help you.
Michael, my foundation is working with MAPS to train therapists of color.
Oh, wow.
And one of the therapists has said, you're going to have a more difficult time treating Black Americans because they're used to walking a tight line. If white person is confronted by the police and they're doing psychedelics, they get a talking to.
Right.
The black person gets locked up.
Yeah.
All that's got to change.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
And also to be in a place where we are doing something that is still extremely, extremely illegal. You know, as Black people, we're going to have to trust everybody involved in that space and everybody involved in getting us there. I think they bring up excellent points. And when they talk about getting locked up, it's not just a cute little weekend behind bars. It is literally years. There are, in some states, mandatory minimums for how long folks need to serve for psychedelic possession. And to my knowledge, in some places, you can get locked up for mushrooms for 3 or 4 years. 3 or 4 years just for mushrooms. So
That's why when the drugs are approved by the FDA, there won't be that risk of arrest.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that the drugs are all illegal now, and given that the drug war is essentially aimed at the Black community,
Right.
that is another source of reluctance. So I think you're absolutely right, Bob.
Yeah.
That was an important
Yeah,
point.
that is a really important point. I hope it is something that we rectify, because I have to say that plant medicine completely rehabilitated me from debilitating depression. And
good, Jade. I love that Jada is being so open and upfront and honest about this, because this takes ovaries, y'all. This takes some serious ovaries to do. And this is like, as a Black woman in the public light saying these things, it's a risk. Like, to be where Jada's at and having this bravery, it's just snaps all around, Jada. I commend you.
it's changed my life for
Hell
the
yeah.
better. I came home. I'm home. So
Hell yeah.
I'm really hoping that we find a way that African Americans can have access to these plant medicines safely.
And the
So-
first thing is talking about it. And that's why I think that this show
Yeah.
is really important, just to start the conversation and to talk about it with professionals.
I have to say, having this conversation makes me feel better, even if I don't totally understand it. I certainly feel like I'm more informed.
Yeah,
You know?
it's a hard thing to totally understand
Yeah.
when you haven't had the experience, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely not being approached as a recreational
Yeah.
thing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's one other small.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Mom and Gammy, all of you guys. This show is just so amazing, and I just want to say how important Red Table Talk is just for the community and for everybody. I really think it's fantastic. Michael, just like Bob's amazing story, which thank you so much for sharing that with us. That really touched me. And I just want to say to you, for me and on the behalf of my generation, thank you for everything that you're doing.
Yeah.
I know that I'm just here because Willow's not here, but I'm so glad to be here. It's still 3 generations, just one of them to do it now.
That's right.
If you ever would like to go on a journey, I would love to escort you to the next one we do. But no pressure, but if at any point
Yeah.
you say I would like to, it's such a loving community, no judgment, and it's just fantastic. And it's in full discretion. So if at all you have any desire, let me know.
I love that. Right, it's all about reaching out. It's all about that. Let me know, and offering it to people you're in community with, offering it to your friends who might want to try it and are curious if you have the ability to do it in a safe way, trip sit them, etc. If you have access to retreats, if you have access to folks who serve the medicine, I love that. You know, inviting people who want to be in it into it. But yeah, that was the episode of the Red Table Talk. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how that episode went. Regrettably, did not hear too much about the indigenous roots of psychedelics, which I personally would have wanted to hear more about. How did they come to the United States? Because how they got to us was really effed up. And I think to be a part of that, to be a part of taking magic mushrooms, to be a part of consuming them, you are also consuming that lineage. You are also consuming the way, the route that the mushrooms took to get to you. So I always link this article in my description, so feel free to find it there. That's about the tragedy of Maria Sabina and the tragedy of how magic mushrooms got to us, because it was in a pretty effed up way. But yeah, I would have wanted to hear a bit about that. I would have wanted to hear a bit about Indigenous people still serving the medicine and their connection to that lineage. I would have wanted to potentially hear from Indigenous voices about that lineage. So I think what they did do was a really solid start, and they touched on a lot of pretty important conversations in psychedelics, especially with the Black community and us obtaining access to psychedelics. But yeah, I just love that they had an entire red table talk about psychedelics. Like, if you would have told me this a year ago, I almost wouldn't have believed you. It's such a beautiful thing. So thanks for watching some of this with me, y'all. I hope you got a kick out of it. If you had a favorite part of this episode, let me know in the comment section. Let me know what you would have wanted to see from a psychedelic red table talk. I did not record the entire episode. I just skipped around a little bit. So please be sure to log on to Facebook, check out the entire red table talk episode in its entirety. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. We have merch, so if you're interested in repping the realm, please check out our merch on Threadless. I am getting up a Patreon, getting that started. But right now, the way you can support this channel is by supporting our merch, subscribing to this channel. I seriously appreciate it. My love goes out to the Red Table Talk for hosting such an important conversation that we need to be having in the Black community, which is a conversation on healing and an intergenerational conversation and a conversation within family. I really love that they did this. All shouts out to them. And I hope y'all at home got a kick out of this Psychonaut Reacts video. If so, please leave a like. Love to y'all, and don't forget to keep it trippy.